how are y'all? Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. Oh, I didn't think I need a microphone. No. I'm Monica Weldon, and I am the President CEO of Bridge the Gap SYNGAP Education and Research Foundation. And I was going to talk to you a little bit about how legislative policy can help in the role of accelerating to treatments. And first, I want to tell you about our mission as an organization. Probably not many of you have heard of SYNGAP 1, but it is a single gene mutation that is linked to intellectual disability, epilepsy gene, and it's also the gene responsible, just recently found to be responsible for brain plasticity. But our mission is to serve and educate and fund research for families with the SYNGAP1 mutation. Before I go in to my story, SYNGAP1 was actually discovered in humans in 2009. 94 to 100% of all our children have epilepsy. We're the highest patient group in the world that has epilepsy paired with intellectual disability. It is also an autism spectrum disorder mutation, and we actually just found a new mechanism in the gene that is going to probably end up linking it to all autism spectrum disorders. And that's in peer review right now, and the manuscript went in this last week. But how I started in this journey is this little guy right here. He's actually one of my twins. This is Beckett, and he has a twin sister. And he was one of 6 diagnosed in the world in 2012, or in North America, I guess I should say. But he was a couple of handfuls of diagnosed. He was the first one diagnosed at Texas Children's, and my journey began with him at 4 months old. And so we went through the diagnostic journey for about 4 years to get that diagnosis of SYNGAP1. And I'm not going to go through and read all the steps that we had to take to get there, but just to give you an idea of the journey and the tests and the things that we had to do, and very expensive, of course, tests to go through. This drove me, after his diagnosis, to try and find out how I could help him, because he's nonverbal. He had many motor coordination problems, sensory processing disorder, you name it, he had it. And you can probably see the list of acronyms of the diagnosis he has on his list of diagnoses. So as I went through the journey, of course, in parallel to that, after he was diagnosed, 2 years after he was diagnosed, in 2014, I started the organization. And after we started the organization, I want to show you a little bit of the history of how we've accelerated to where we are now, and how legislative policy can actually help us accelerate the process even more. And I want to focus on the OPEN Act. And I did not put the House bill, but I wanted to give you the House and the Senate bill. It's 1223 is a House, and the Senate is 1509. And as we went through this process of trying to accelerate to treatments for our children, we ended up finding out much more about this gene that's going to overlap into many other neurological disorders. At the end of 2017, we began our drug discovery program. And where this falls into the OPEN Act, and I kind of wanted to go into how we need to incentivize more research going into drug discovery now with the OPEN Act. We ended up winning a $3.6 million research grant from NIH that is actually running the largest drug molecule library in the world at Scripps, Florida. This particular program, and I guess the point I want to make is with this policy of the OPEN Act, is that it's going to benefit us in many, many different ways now. Because as we went through Beckett's journey, we ended up finding out that several of the off-label medications that he's taking has actually changed his life and our lives for the better, and he's progressing. So the Open Act actually focuses on repurposing of drugs because it's like 30 years to get to a drug, from drug development or from discovery all the way to the counter, and millions of dollars and time. And so our children don't have that kind of time. So trying to figure out innovative ways to get to a treatment to better the quality of the lives of these children. So I believe that, and I was thinking about this, how can we take the data that our children are taking over-the-counter medications now and using that data, incentivizing pharmaceutical companies and industry and biotech to start looking at that to find new indications while we are looking for a comprehensive treatment that will help the majority of the symptoms. I believe that, well, and that's kind of what we're doing now, is I've finagled my scientist to start looking at how the drugs that are affecting our kids now, which one is actually a blood pressure medicine that we were shocked worked. And so if it's working in him, for that indication, it's not a real indication yet, then we need to get that pharmaceutical company, of course, that would manufacture that, and try to incentivize them in looking how it's helping to try to find a new indication. But you need incentives to do that, especially in the rare disease community. I have 50 patients in the United States. It's going to be really hard for me to get a pharmaceutical company interested in trying to look at these repurposed drugs that are working on our kids now while we're back at the lab trying to find a treatment for gene therapy and something that will help them in the long run, a treatment. So I kind of put some ideas down and there, and also innovative type things that industry and academia can do, partnering and coming together to create initiatives like this. This is the initiative that we are actually running right now. This was a grant that Scripps Florida Research won from the Bill Gates Foundation. It was $6 million. And they ended up taking this money and buying every single molecule they could find on the face of the earth. And that's what we're running our drug screens on right now. And so we need to find ways of creating partnerships and innovation together to try to do that. And I believe that repurposing these drugs is going to help because it's also going to save time. Now, if you notice in the graphs here, you've got all of these drugs that they purchased have all passed a phase 1 trial. And so you've just saved yourself a lot of time and money starting off with a repurposed drug to try to find a treatment for another indication. And a lot of these drugs are shelved. They've never seen the light of day in years. So why aren't we using that? And that's what we're doing right now. My son and 8 other children are in a project in partnership with Texas Children's Hospital and Baylor with Scripps Florida, where we gathered all of the blood samples. Baylor grew them into stem cells, creating synthetic or human neurons, partnered with Scripps to take those neurons and run drug assays. They run 1 million molecules a week. And so that's what they're using that $3.6 million for, looking for a hit. And that's where we are right now. So we're looking for that hit. Another thing that I guess I would like to point out is that when we do get a hit, how are we going to get to that drug? How are we going to get pharmaceutical companies to, or not necessarily pharmaceutical companies, that and all the other processes to get into access to those drugs? And then also, the gene therapy type things. But I wanted to show you that of how I think that the Open Act will incentivize industry to be more apt to invest in small patient populations using something that's already created, because it's working for us now. And I'm hoping we have a hit soon. I'm praying, but it is looking very promising for our patient group, because if we end up getting a hit for our patient group, it is probably going to end up bleeding into and overlapping into so many other disorders. And so you can kill 10 birds with one stone, right? Instead of just taking one drug for one indication, because it's going to help a number of people. So I kind of wanted to make that point with the repurposing of drugs, but also why I think this act is important is because since the beginning of our organization, and the gene was just discovered in 2009, my son was diagnosed in 2012. I started the organization in 2014. Oops, and it didn't format, but that's okay. It's investment. This is all of the NIH funding that has gone into one gene, SYNGAP1. And we're still not done with 2018 yet. We had actually one of the largest grants, one of our scientists won at Johns Hopkins, Rick Hugenair, who actually discovered the gene, won $5 million just for SYNGAP1. And we're actually working on that. So this is going to justify passing the Open Act, because you don't want to spend all this money and for naught, right? You're investing in research. And if you can't get access to the drugs and get people interested in what you found in the labs, that's a waste of money. So I believe that the Open Act is incredibly important to pass. So I wanted to share that with you, and I thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. And I think I'm out of time, right? I could talk for days. Okay. So thank you very much.